New York City has always been a magnet for the artistic class. And by the 1970s, a loose-knit group of artists and writers called the New York School had taken hold. When Maggie Nelson moved to the city in the early 90s, she was inspired by this group. Soon, however, her journey led her to find her own voice. This is the story of a CUNY graduate who became a MacArthur Fellow and her ability to transcend literary and artistic genres.
The New York School of Artists was a groundbreaking group that included people like Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, John Asbury, Joan Mitchell, and many others. Artists who were creating new modes of expression in art and writing. Maggie Nelson moved to New York in 1994, jumping in at the tail end of this first wave of experimentation.
I moved to Chinatown, Lower East Side. I moved there to be a writer, and also at that time I was very interested in dance and did a lot of, I guess what they call postmodern dance. And so I wanted to be near movement research and Judson Church.
Living downtown influenced Maggie's burgeoning writing career.
The Lower East Side was the place for me to be. At that time, I was mostly involved with poetry and performance. Poetry project at St. Mark's Church, which, is on 9th Street, is kind of like a temple of avant-garde and experimental literature in downtown. And I worked there for many years and we went to events there, worked in the archives, ended up curating a Monday night series.
She also performed at the Poetry Project. This is Shiner, recorded in 2001.
I wake up growling apples and dirt, naked and stretched under a barn sky. I cannot recall how I hurt my right eye. Arch of vessels, gone grape under the lid, an army of red ants, a cast of shadows, good God.
I don't know what kind of scene you would describe it as, but it was very related to, kind of post-punk and postmodern dance and performance. And we didn't have the internet, so it was the age of the Xerox flyer and the stapled together zine book. And I would go to St. Mark's bookshop. They would take your books on consignment if you self-published them, which I did.
But there was a person that Maggie was truly drawn to.
I moved to New York and I basically was kind of following Eileen Myles because Eileen at that point was, really at the center of a kind of queer feminist avant-garde in literature based around the Lower East Side where I wanted to be. And also Eileen was very hooked in with a lot of different arts and performance. So when I started taking classes with Eileen, when they were teaching just informally around the city, I met so many people in the arts and people who remain friends today, intergenerationally. So that was all really important. To me, those years in New York were where I was living the dream of the life that I wanted to have. It wasn't about money or being recognized. And I think that still is a good writing life or art life, and art should feel like,
Eventually, Maggie enrolled at CUNY, pursuing her PhD while working at the Great Jones Cafe, which has since closed. Her thesis was called Women, the New York School and Other True Abstractions, about the women poets and painters of the New York School. It was a fresh look at these artists, focusing on women like Joan Mitchell, Alice Notley, Eileen Myles, and others, women overshadowed by the male figures like Pollock and Frank O'Hara. The dissertation was revised and became a published book.
Partly why I wanted to stay in New York and be at CUNY was that all of my subjects, hence the New York School, New York was very central to that research topic. CUNY was everything. It was so great. It was fantastic. Just deciding to go there was really important to me because I lived in New York for quite some time. There was just nothing stodgy about it. The people who I studied with, a lot of them had the kind of careers that I wanted, and it was important to me to stay in the city and to be part of the city life, as it were. So it was the perfect decision and made me the kind of writer I am today. When you're at CUNY, and you get a teaching job as a graduate student, you get a list. You want to teach at Staten Island, Brooklyn, Hunter. You already know that you're in a network, and you're also in a network with a social history about tuition and the value of public universities. You're in a network about the social and about why all of that matters. And to me, that is the best place to develop oneself and community.
Maggie Nelson has published upwards of 10 books. They range from books of poetry to a memoir about the man who murdered her aunt. But she became more renowned for the genre-bending works like The Argonauts, which melded memoir, theory, and motherhood into a book that won the National Book Critics Award for Criticism in 2015. She was awarded the MacArthur Fellowship the following year.
Putting forward my thought process is what I'm putting forward. It's about asking good questions and then throwing all of your thought process about how you wrangled with those questions. Annie Dillard taught this. Annie Dillard has a quote. She says something like, spend it all, like don't save it for later. Don't put in your drawer the thing you think is so special. So I think that notion of not being precious, not holding anything back is really, and trusting that more will come later is a real ethos that I've always really respected.
The pages that follow do not diagnose a crisis of freedom and propose a means of fixing it or of fixing us, nor do they take political freedom as their focus. Instead, they bear down on the felt complexities of the freedom drive in 4 distinct realms.
Her book from 2021, On Freedom, explores freedom from 4 quadrants: art, drugs, sexuality, and climate change.
Myself as a writer, I'm very focused on the problem of that book. Sometimes in literature, like I said before about coming up with good questions, sometimes that process of just clarifying the problem is good enough. It's not like, how do we become free? It's like, look at this knotted nest of urges towards freedom and obligation that pull at us all the time. It's no wonder we can't solve the problem of freedom, because that's not the human condition. I often have a kind of keyword idea like freedom or cruelty or the color blue. It'll start to direct, kind of like the way when you fall in love, every song on the radio starts to sound like it was written for you and that person. When I have a keyword kind of flushing my life with its color, everything seems like it's related to it. I'll start gathering things. I'll start clipping articles. I'll start marking passages. It's a fascinating way to go through a few years. I recommend it. It keeps your curiosity alive, because instead of the world just being a wash, you're kind of on the hunt, My first few jobs in academia proper, which was a year I took at Wesleyan in the English department, I was spooked, because I was like, I'm not going to like being an academic. This just isn't for me. I just want to be a writer, living that life, whatever that means that I am in academic life. But I do have a scholarly bone, clearly. I knew I wanted to teach, but I thought, let's see what the art school context is like.
And now, Maggie teaches writing at the University of Southern California.
I have a poetic series called The Canal Diaries about the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn. I lived there for a short period of time. I would just go down to the Gowanus Canal in the morning and the night and just scribe everything that was happening at the canal. And, it's like all writing is the power of your attention. Scribing is a way to make literal the power of your attention, noticing. And once you start noticing, the world becomes a much more interesting place. I always feel like with books, you just burn out whatever you were curious about, you just burn through it. It's like there was a big pile, you lit it, you burned it, and it's not like you solved it, but you're like, there's nothing left there. You have time to move on. That's a pile of ashes, and then you just turn out, and then you just start making your next pile.
Always pushing forward, Maggie Nelson's latest book is called Like Love. The book is a mashup of essays alongside conversations she's had with people she's met on a literary journey that started right here in the City of Art.